Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbar, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Jason Russ. This week marks 102 years since the August offensive on Gallipoli. After months of stalemate, Australian, New Zealand, British and Indian troops attempted to break the deadlock on the peninsula by launching a series of assaults against Turkish strongpoints. It was hoped that these attacks would lead to a decisive victory. The ensuing battles were the largest and most costly in the 8-month-long Gallipoli campaign. All the Allied attacks ended in heartbreaking failure and produced heavy losses on both sides. Many of the sites of the bloody struggle, places such as Lone Pine, the Neck, Chinook Bear and Hill 60, sadly became familiar names in Australia and New Zealand. Today, we commemorate the 3rd Light Horse Brigade's charge at the Neck, which was part of the wider breakout actions by Commonwealth forces during the August offensive. This disastrous attack caused casualties of more than 370 men from the 8th and 10th Light Horse Regiments, with more than 200 killed. We warmly welcome the family of Trooper Norman Charles Dyer, who lost his life in that battle. In remembering his service and sacrifice, we honour all those who fought at the Neck. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr. John King, President, ACT Returned and Services League of Australia. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and by students on behalf of the following schools. From South Australia, Seaford 6 to 12 School. From Queensland, Holy Family Primary School, Indooroopilly, and Chelona State School. From New South Wales, Moama Anglican Grammar School. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorials galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Trooper Norman Charles Dyer. Norman Dyer was born in 1889, one of 10 children of Charles and Elizabeth Dyer of Boolaroo Centre in South Australia's Flinders Ranges. After attending state school and then Muirden College in Adelaide, Norman moved to Kelliberin on the Western Australian wheat belt and worked on the family property of Holmbush. Dyer enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces just weeks after the outbreak of war, travelling to Perth to sign on at the Light Horse Training Camp at Guildford. After months of training, he sailed for Egypt as an original member of the 10th Light Horse Regiment. While the infantry then in camp in Egypt embarked for fighting in the Dardanelles in early April, the Light Horse remained in camp and trained for future offensive actions. The 10th Light Horse was sent to Gallipoli as reinforcements following the failure of the landing and the heavy casualties within the Australian and New Zealand forces. The steep terrain and the static nature of fighting on Gallipoli prevented mounted units from participating in their intended role. But the 10th Light Horse Regiment and the rest of the 3rd Light Horse Brigade were sent to Gallipoli in late May as dismounted infantry to help and defend the Anzac positions. This they did in the area around Walker's Ridge through June and July, until they were ultimately drawn into the Allied attempt to break out of the beachhead in what became known as the August Offensive. Beginning on the 7th of August 1915, the offensive called for a series of synchronised attacks along the Anzac positions. Feints took place at Lone Pine and in the south at the Neck in the north in an attempt to draw the Ottoman reinforcements away from the main thrust and capture the heights of the Sari Bear Range. That day, the 3rd Light Horse Brigade made its ill-fated assault at the Neck, a narrow stretch of ground where Ottoman positions were barely 30 metres from the Australian trenches. Despite a bombardment that failed to destroy Ottoman machine guns covering the area, the Light Horse charged the Ottoman positions in successive waves, met by a fusillade of rifle and machine gun fire, cut down barely 10 metres from their own parapet. The 10th Light Horse charged at the Neck after 2 waves from the 8th Light Horse had been decimated before them. In less than 15 minutes, 230 Australian troops had been killed attempting to rush the Ottoman trenches. Witnesses saw Norman Dyer jumping the parapet and rushing into no man's land at the Neck. Despite later reports that he had been seen in hospital, Red Cross searchers found no trace of him in Egypt or Malta. Not knowing whether her brother was dead or alive, Norman's sister Madeline wrote to the Department of Defence seeking information. "Can you unfathom this mystery for us?" she wrote in October 1915. "Uncertainty and suspense are worse than the blow." Without further news of his whereabouts, Norman remained missing in action until a court of inquiry held in January of 1916 determined that he had been killed in action on the 7th of August. Aged 26 at the time of his death, Norman's body was never recovered from the battlefield. Today, his name is listed on the Lone Pine Memorial, alongside 5,000 Australian and New Zealand soldiers who died on Gallipoli and have no known grave. His name is listed on the roll of honour to my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving the First World War. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Trooper Norman Charles Dyer, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.